Welcome to the Thea Lee podcast. It's January 11th, 2026, and we are on day 11 of reading through the Bible. Today we pick up right after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, and Jacob goes to his father-in-law Laban and asks him to please release him so that he can go home to his own country. And so he asks permission to take his wives and children and leave. Laban replies he understands that he is now a wealthy man because God has blessed him through Jacob, that it is Jacob's hard work and blessing from the Lord that has made him wealthy. So he asks Jacob what he would like his wages to be. And then Jacob replies that he doesn't want anything, but he would like to continue to watch over his flocks and inspect the flocks today and remove any sheep and goats that are speckled, spotted, or black, and those would be his wages. And then in the future, when he goes to check on the animals that he has given Jacob as his wages, he'll be able to see that Jacob has been honest and hasn't taken anything from Laban's flocks because all of Jacob's goats will be speckled, spotted, or black. So Laban agrees and says, "This will be as you say." But unfortunately, before Jacob gets to inspect the flocks, Laban sends his sons out to remove all the streaked and spotted male goats and female goats that were speckled and spotted or had white patches or black, and he sent them 3 days' journey away from where Jacob was. So Jacob did not get to take them that day. Jacob then took some fresh branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees, and he peeled off strips of bark, making white streaks on them. And he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, and then that's where they also mated. So if they mated in front of these branches, then they gave birth to babies that had streaked, speckled, or spotted coats. And Jacob would separate those lambs from Laban's flock, and at mating time, he turned the flock to face Laban's animals that were streaked or black, and this is how he built his own flock, instead of increasing Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, then Jacob would place those peeled branches in the watering troughs in front of them, and they would mate in front of those branches. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones. So Jacob ended up with the stronger animals. And in this way, Jacob became very wealthy. Then, of course, Laban and his sons started grumbling about Jacob and his wealth. And they started saying things like the only reason that Jacob was getting wealthy was at the expense of Laban. So the Lord comes to Jacob and says to return to the land of his father and his grandfather and to his relatives there, and that he would be with him. So Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where he's watching the flock, and he starts talking to them about this, how he had noticed their father's attitude towards him has changed, but that he knew God has been with him because he had worked very hard for their father, but that he had cheated him every time. He kept changing their wages. So God had not allowed to do him any harm because when Laban would say, "The speckled animals will be your wages," the whole flock would begin to produce speckled young. And then when he changed and said, "The striped animals will now be your wages," then the whole flock seemed to have striped animals. So in this way, God had taken care of the father's animals and given them to Jacob. One time during mating season, Jacob had a dream and saw that the male goats were mating with the females that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then the angel of God said to him in the dream, "Jacob." And Jacob said, "Yes, here I am." And the angel said, "Look up, and you will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock. For I have seen how Laban has treated you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. Now get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth." So Rachel and Leah responded that they agreed with this. They knew that they were not going to inherit any of their father's wealth, and they said that they were starting to be treated like foreign women anyway. So Jacob secretly packed up his family and took all of his flocks and left without Laban knowing that they were going. Laban at that time was quite a ways away shearing some sheep. So it was 3 days later when Laban finds out that Jacob had fled. So he gathers a group of relatives and he takes out in hot pursuit to try and find them. The night before he catches up with Jacob, though, God appears to him in a dream and tells him, "I am warning you, leave Jacob alone." But Laban goes and catches up with them. And of course he says all these things to him like, What do you mean stealing away like this? How dare you drag my daughters away like they're prisoners of war? And he says, if I knew you were going, I would have given you a feast, and you didn't let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren. And then he says, you have acted very foolishly, and I could destroy you. But the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone. He said he could understand that he was homesick. But then he says, why have you stolen my gods? So Rachel, before they left, had taken his household idols, but Jacob didn't know it. So Jacob says that the reason he left so quickly was he was afraid that Laban would try and take his daughters from him, but he didn't know anything about the gods. So he said, let the person who has taken them die, but if you find anything among my stuff, you're welcome to look. So Laban goes through all of the tents. By the time he gets to Rachel's tent, she's sitting on her camel's saddle, and she had hidden the idols underneath her saddle. So she tells her father, please forgive me if I don't get up, but I'm having my monthly period. So Laban continued his search, and he never found the idols. So then Jacob says, what have I ever done that is wrong to you? That he had worked so many years for him and never done a single thing to hurt him. If there was ever a loss of an animal, Jacob was the one who took that loss. So then he says, in fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, and the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work, and that's why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. So Laban comes back and says, these women are my daughters, and the grandchildren are my grandchildren, and all of these flocks are my flocks. In fact, everything that you have is mine. But what can I do about that now? So let's make a covenant, you and I. They set up some stones as a monument. They called them the witness pile to this covenant they were making, and then they also called it the watchtower, because they ended up saying that if either one of them did anything that was against the other, that God would see it, that God would be their witness. And then also they said, let's make a promise that I will never cross this line to harm you, and you will never cross the line to come harm me. They respected the boundary line. Jacob made a sacrifice to God there on the mountain, and everyone had a covenant feast. Then the next morning, Laban got up early, kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and blessed them, and he went home. So today, I guess I'm struck with the fact that Jacob is still under this covenant, this everlasting covenant, this generational covenant that Abraham made with God. And God is honoring that covenant. He is protecting Jacob and blessing him. However, it does seem that Jacob is having to pay some consequences for his past actions. He has cheated his brother Esau a couple times out of his own birthright. So it seems that God is letting him pay the consequences in having a father-in-law who repeatedly cheated him. And that, I believe, is true for our lives today. We can be in covenant and relationship with God, and he will bless us and protect us. But if we make wrong choices, he allows us to deal with those consequences. He doesn't remove them from our lives. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk again tomorrow.